Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Iron ore miner Kumba released a lobbying document this week in which it dismisses government's argument that a developmental steel price will boost manufacturing and downstream jobs. Engineering News editor Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the report and its implications. Terence, welcome to Second Take. Why did Kumba compile the report and what does it assert?
Well, there's been a sort of toing and froing going on between government, Kumba and ArcelorMittal since early last year, when Kumba decided to unilaterally withdraw from a supply agreement with ArcelorMittal, and the basis of that was that ArcelorMittal had failed to convert its mineral rights at the Sishen iron ore mine in the Northern Cape in terms of South Africa's mining laws. And since that time, there's been quite a lot of legal activity, and it makes the front pages quite a lot. But there's also been a debate about the developmental steel price, because back in 2001, when the unbundling of ISCOR happened and the new steel company was formed and the mining company, which is now Kumba, was formed, there was a deal done where basically the steel company would remain vertically integrated and therefore was receiving its iron ore at a cost plus 3% rate, which is far lower than it would otherwise pay at a market-related rate. So they've been getting very low-cost iron ore. But at the same time, back then it was LNM, which became ISCOR, which eventually became ArcelorMittal, never really passed on that benefit of that low-cost iron ore to the consumer. So the DTR, the government, which is the Department of Trade and Industry, has been at loggerheads with ArcelorMittal for many years over the fact that they never passed through that benefit to the steel consumer. So that's the background, and then there was this new fight that came about when Kumba withdrew from the supply agreement, and then eventually, after much to and fro, an interim supply agreement was put in place to sort of bide us through this intense legal period of arbitration and a number of court cases. So that's the background to it. And an interdepartmental task team was also set up in government to see how they could safeguard, one, the principle of low-cost iron ore, and ensuring that that low-cost iron ore was passed through to the steel consumer in South Africa. And there's been a number of meetings between Kumba, ArcelorMittal and these government departments to look at how those principles will be sustained. And in that process, Kumba has drafted a document in response, saying, this is how we see the steel and iron ore supply chain in South Africa, and we don't really think there's going to ever be a benefit of low-cost iron ore because they say there's a very low demand elasticity for steel. So even if you reduce the price by 10%, it's only going to really uplift consumption or demand by about 2 or 3%. Therefore, it's not going to really be a big job creator downstream. And they feel that the focus should rather be on where South Africa has a competitive advantage, and that's really upstream in the mining of iron ore, where they feel 14,000 jobs could be liberated if the infrastructure is put in place for a doubling of exports and a doubling of production.
How has government responded?
Well, government, as you would expect, disagrees with this analysis. They say you have to take it from whence it comes. It comes from a mining company. They're talking to their own figures in their own book and their own future. And their analysis of downstream manufacturing and the constraints to downstream manufacturing state clearly that steel prices are a major factor. And therefore they do want to insist that there's a developmental steel price in place. And they're saying obviously you can't do an analysis on a linear basis because that would be, in their view, a step change. It would be creating a new level for steel prices that would create sort of a long-term certainty. Yes, the steel prices would go up and down, but they would still be discounted relative to what you would have in terms of import parity price, which has been the traditional model in South Africa and hasn't really, in terms of the pricing terms, hasn't really changed very radically since the introduction of a benchmark system, which ArcelorMittal introduced at the heart of the fight with DTR, which eventually went to an excessive pricing dispute at the Competition Tribunal, which ArcelorMittal lost, but eventually settled with Harmony and DRD Gold. So you can see there's a lot of moving parts, but the principle that government's saying is that we need low-cost iron ore we want this steel producer to be effectively vertically integrated, whether it's ArcelorMittal or another steel producer, and we want that benefit passed on to steel consumers in South Africa.
Terence, how do you see the debate around the pricing of iron ore and steel play out in the coming months and years?
Well, I think government's going to stick to its guns. I think they said, this unbundling agreement of 2001, which government was very, very instrumental in facilitating, it was basically a bailout of ISCOR back then, which was really heading for the wall. And they, as part of that deal, invested in such a way or structured the deal in such a way to sort of safeguard vertical integration. So it's not a theoretical debate as presented by Kumba in its paper. Can a steel company survive on export parity pricing rather than this unmarket related cost plus 3? It's not really. That's ahistorical. It actually has a context, and I think government's going to continue reminding the miner of that context, and it will continue reminding ArcelorMittal that it hasn't abided by its part of the deal, which was to pass on that benefit to steel consumers in South Africa. But it's not going to go away, and I think months versus years, I think it's going to be years yet, probably before we get somewhere. I think there will be some sort of negotiated settlement, whether it's going to be to the point, I think it's going to be, the timing is going to be dependent on the arbitration process between Kumba and ArcelorMittal, and that we hear is only going to start in 2012. It's also going to be, about how much priority government gives this issue. And it looks to me within the new growth path, you've got the Economic Development Department, Trade and Industry and Mineral Resources all singing from that hymn sheet. So I think it remains a priority issue for them. I think it's a victory they can see that they can win. So I think they will move towards some sort of negotiated settlement, notwithstanding the arbitration process, notwithstanding the legal cases around the mineral rights, which have got a long way to run yet. I think they only start in August. So the timing is unclear, and I think that this matter will probably continue to be on the agenda for some months, if not years. But I think that ultimately there'll have to be some give and take from the mining company as well as the steel company, so that government can safeguard those two principles.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.
Led by Terence Creamer, Mining Weekly's bureaus in Perth, Johannesburg and Toronto deliver unrivaled global coverage of the resources industry and the companies shaping it. Creamer Media's Mining Weekly, for mining news around the clock.